Alright guys, so starting back up. So this is part 2 of lesson 7.2. Please make sure that you've already completed part 1 before you move on to part 2. So part 2, we're going to be getting into another form of factoring by GCF. And this method is called factoring by grouping. So you may be able to factor a polynomial by grouping the terms. And by grouping, like you're taking the polynomial you're given and you're dividing it. And I'm not talking about dividing as in the operation, I'm talking as like this part and then that part. So when a polynomial has 4 terms, you can make 2 groups and factor out a GCF from each of the groups. So what that means is when you're given these 4 terms now, it's not like the GCF is going to come out of all 4 terms. You're going to group it so like you have 2 terms that you can take out of GCF, and then you're going to have 2 other terms you can take out of different GCF. So let's go through an example so I can explain it as we go. So factor each polynomial by grouping, check your answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide it into 2 separate binomials. So just kind of looking at how this one's broken up, I have 6h to the 4th and negative 4h cubed, and I have 12h minus 8. Well, if I look at these first 2 terms, I know I can take out factors from there. And then if I look at these last 2 terms, I know there's factors in there that I can take out. So I'm going to leave my problem how it's written, and I'm just going to take it and divide it in half. So doing so, I'm just going to draw a line down the middle to show my groupings. So I have this part being one grouping, and then this over here being my second grouping. So what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to factor out the GCF from my first grouping. So with 6h to the 4th and negative 4h cubed, I know that I can take out a factor of 2 from 6 and 4. And then I have h to the 4th and h cubed. Well, I know I can take out an h to the 3rd because that's the lowest possible exponent. So I'm now going to divide each one of these by 2h cubed. So when I do that, over on this one, I'm left with 3h, bring down my sign, and I'm left with 2. Now I'm going to do my second grouping. So this sign that's right here gets carried down. So I'm going to put plus, and now I'm going to find the GCF. Well, 12 and 8, I know I can take a 4 out of both. They both don't have variables, so I can't take 12. Or I can't take an h. So if I take 4 out of 12h, I'm left with 3h. And if I take a 4 out of negative 8, I'm left with negative 2. Now I'm not done yet because it's not fully simplified. Look at what we have right here. What are you noticing? So if you're saying to yourself that inside your parentheses they're the same, you're 100% correct. Meaning what we just finished up with in part 1 of the video, we're going to continue with in the problems with factoring by grouping. So you're going to drop one of those common factors down, so that's your GCF. So I'm going to bring down one of my 3h minus 2's. And just so you guys know, when you are doing factoring by grouping, you are always looking for these to be the same in there. Okay? You're always looking for those to be the same. And then I'm going to just write in the second set of parentheses what I have outside. So I have a 2h cubed plus 4. And I just did a factoring by grouping. So you start out by taking your original polynomial. You're dividing it where you can simply have 2 terms that you can take out of GCF. You take a term out as your GCF in the first grouping, and then you take a term out in your second grouping, and then at that point now you should recognize that inside your parentheses, they're the same. And then you're going to drop one down, and then you're going to write your other factors in a set of parentheses itself. Now, to ensure that you guys did this correctly, you can perform a check. And when you perform a check now, you're simply going to take what you got, which was 3h minus 2, times the quantity of 2h to the third plus 4. And you're simply just going to FOIL this in order to check. So you're going to do 3h times 2h cubed. Well, that gives me 6h to the fourth. 3h times 4, that's 12h. Negative 2 times 2h cubed is negative 4h cubed. And negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. And then just rewriting it in standard form, you would have 6h to the fourth minus 4h cubed plus 12h minus 8. And then looking at what I originally started with, they are the same exact thing. So I know I did it correctly. So again, guys, take your original polynomial, divide it into two groupings, find the GCF of each grouping, and then simplify it. All right, let's do one more together. So I'm going to take my original polynomial and I need to divide it into two different groupings. So I'm just going to take it and divide it right in half how it's written. Okay? So looking at my first grouping, I have 5y to the fourth minus 15y cubed. Well, 5 and 15, 5's a factor of both, so I can take out a 5. Then I have y to the fourth and y cubed. So I know I can take out a y cubed there. So if I take out this term from both of these, so remember guys, it's like dividing, you are left with y minus 3. Okay? And then I'm going to drop this sign because it comes down, and I'm going to find my GCF in my second set. Well, my GCF is just going to be y because they're both sharing that. So if I take a y out of y squared, I'm left with y. If I take a y out of negative 3y, I'm left with negative 3. Then I ask myself, is this the same? And the answer is yes. So I drop one down. And then I take what I have outside and I write it as a set of its own parentheses. And there you go. Now, to make sure I did it correctly, I'm simply just going to perform a check by using my FOIL method. So y times 5y cubed is 5y to the fourth. Y times y is y squared. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15y cubed. Negative 3 times y is negative 3y. Rewriting in standard form, 5y to the fourth minus 15y cubed plus y squared minus 3y. And double checking with what I started with, it's exactly what I started with. Alright. Now, I'm going to have you guys try the U-Try problems. If you are struggling with them, today's just the first day. We are going to be spending more time with these problems on the next push-out day, but I want you guys to try the U-Try problems right now. If you have questions, please reach out to me. Alright, there's your first set.
Where's our little friend?
Alright, so looking at this problem, the GCF in this case for this second grouping was 1, which is perfectly capable of happening in order to have both of my terms inside this parentheses to be the same. Okay, so it is okay to factor out a GCF of 1 if nothing else can come out. Alright, so like I said before, guys, we're going to spend more time with practicing factoring by grouping on the next push-out day. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to keep moving on. And we still actually do use factoring by grouping. So if you are struggling, please make sure you send me a message and I would be happy to help you. But that's a check if I wanted to. So here you go. If two quantities are opposites, so if you notice you have 5 minus x and then you have x minus 5, they're opposites of each other, okay? So their sum ends up being 0. So if you were just to like combine your like terms here, you would notice that you would just get 0. So that's one thing for you guys to remember, is if two quantities are opposites, then their sum is 0. So recognizing opposite binomials can help you factor polynomials. Okay, so the binomials of x minus 5 and x and 5 minus x are opposites. So you can rewrite 5 minus x as -1 times x minus 5. So what they did in that case is they first took this middle term, or this term here, and they rewrote it with the x first. So it was like -x plus 5. They're trying to take that and mimic what is here. So in order to do that, they're going to have to factor out a -1 first. So if I take out the -1 from there, like so my GCF of -1, you're left with x, and then you would have that minus 5 part. Okay, so that's all this is showing you guys, is that you can take something written as 5 minus x and rewrite it to be -1 times the quantity of x minus 5. So, and that kind of takes off the part where don't forget that -1 factor, okay, when you're going throughout the rest of the problem. So, factoring by grouping, still follow what we've been doing. Take what you're given, divide it into 2 parts. Find the GCF. So you have 2x cubed and 12x squared. Well, that's going to be 2x to the second. So when you take that out, you're left with x minus, take out 2 from 12, that's 6. X squared and x squared, so I'm just left with x minus 6. So then on the second term, drop your sign, so you have plus. And then in this case here, 18 and 3x, you know you can take out a 3, so you're left with 6 minus x. Now remember, you're looking to have these the same. But in this case, this one right here is written differently. So I'm going to take this one right here and rewrite it so I have x first. So that's now going to become 2x squared times the quantity of x minus 6 plus 3 times -x plus 6. Now it's almost to the point where they're the same. It just has this negative value here and positive value there. So in reality, I need it to mimic this part. So I'm going to take out a -1 factor now. So this first set stays the same. This becomes plus. Like I said, I'm taking out a -1 factor. Okay, you still have that 3. So when I take a -1 out of each of these terms now, you're left with x minus 6. And now looking at your problem, are your terms inside the parentheses the same? And the answer is yes. So you did it correctly. Now I'm just going to simplify this part right here. So that now gives me 2x squared times the quantity of x minus 6. -1 times 3 gives me -3. And then x minus 6. And then now I'm going to drop down one of my x minus 6's. And then I'm going to group my terms that I have out here. So that becomes 2x squared minus 3. And there you have it. So in this case, you're still following factoring by grouping as what we just did. Okay, you rewrite with x first. Then you take out a -1 factor for your second group. And then you just simply simplify. Okay? So these two steps right here, they're new, but the first and the last step are what we have done. Okay. Now, some of you might be saying, well, couldn't I just take this and rewrite it? And the answer is yes. So if you wanted to, you could rewrite this part right here. So like if I was given the 2x cubed minus 12x squared minus 3x plus 18, and then you were to simplify it, again, just by doing your grouping, you have 2x squared on the outside, and you would have x minus 6, and then taking out your GCF from over here now. Since this is a negative, remember you bring the sign down, and then you have 3 and 18, so that's 3, and then again it's x. Now if I take out a -3 from positive 18, you're left with -6, okay? And then from there, your middle terms are the same, okay? And then from this part now, you would go from here down, okay? So if you wanted to rewrite it that way, you guys could always do that. But I am going to ask that you guys try the 2 U-try problems that are written, and then come back and check your answers. So pause the video right now and then come back and check your answers. So there's the answer to the first problem. If you guys will notice, I had to factor out the -1 because I just went with how the problem was originally written. And then I had to finish simplifying. And then the next one, and there's the second one. Again, guys, you had to factor out the -1 for this process. One thing to also mention is that since this was a negative x that's out here, you divide both of them by the negative x term. So negative divided by negative gave me a positive one, and then in this case you have a positive divided by a negative, so you know you need a negative value. So some of you might have been confused by that, but that's how you're going to get that answer. Again, guys, if you wanted to, you could regroup it in a different way. Remember, you can always perform a check in order to ensure that you're going to get the same terms back, okay? So that concludes lesson 7.2 for today. What you guys now need to do is make sure you complete the exit ticket. It's just 3 questions for you guys to do. Like I said, we're going to spend more time on this material on the next push-out day, just to kind of give us more practice and get more comfortable with it. But if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Other than that, please make sure you complete the exit ticket. Have a great day, guys.